Dan Culkin.
And this is Nathan Goldman of DKNG Studios. You're listening to the Master of One podcast, and you can find us at dkngstudios.com.
Welcome to this extended Sandbox episode of the Master of One podcast, part 2 for this week. This week we talk to design podcast pioneer and host of the hugely successful show Adventures in Design, Mark Brickey. I'm Andrew, your Master of Art and Design.
I'm Patrick, your Master of Television and Film.
And I'm Luke, your Master of Toys and Games.
So circle up with the ones you trust, because this talk show is about to get underway.
Where are the cameras?
So for this Sandbox episode, we're excited to talk to somebody we met a few months ago at Creative South. And it's somebody, if you're listening to the show, you probably have heard of before. This is a guy who has pioneered the design podcast. He is a designer himself. He has worked with some amazing brands, including Disney. And guys, he is the host of Adventures in Design. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Mark Brickey to the show.
All right.
Thank you, fellas. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. That was better the fifth time. Yeah, absolutely.
Some might say you're the podcast man,
Yes.
but that's just what I've heard on the street.
Some would say that.
Some would say that.
The
Mark,
tattoo across my chest would let everybody know that I'm the podcast man.
Thank you. See, I'm the only one who's seen you shirtless.
You gotta
I
stop
guess maybe
showing that
that's
to people, dude. It's a weird thing. You just walk up and...
It's all right. It's all right. Do you guys enjoy the word podcast? Because I try really hard in all my marketing stuff and when I reach out to new guests, I try not to overly use that word because it's basically the bottom rung in the entertainment industry. And there's so many people that are, I got a podcast, and you hear lots of jokes. Everybody's got a podcast. And when you do it full time and you do it as a career, I try to use the term talk show as much as possible, just because I feel like podcast is sort of synonymous with amateurs, hobbyists. And
But
when you do
I
it
hear
full time,
talk show, I think like conservative, like hot button issue host.
oh, well, then you haven't listened to great talk shows in your life, because there are David Letterman had a talk show, and that's what I grew up watching, and it was one of my all-time heroes. So when I hear the word podcast, I'm always like, and then I think, am I making it rough on myself? Because it's probably the easiest way to describe what it is that I do, but podcast just sounds so amateur.
So I actually, in the last week, I've started thinking about that, because I've heard so many people that that I know personally who now have a podcast. And I'm like, when I say we're doing a podcast, I mean something different than when that person says it.
Exactly.
And so I get what you're saying. It is one of those situations where it's when it's something you're trying to do as your career, or it's something that you're doing as whatever you would call a hobby plus, like a prosumer. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the level we're at right now. We make money doing it, but we don't do it full time. It does, when you see some of the other products that are put out there, it does feel like it cheapens it. But I don't know of the best way to go about approaching that, because you're right, it does say
It seems like
what
the
it
most
is.
succinct way of saying it.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean,
it does
I guess
have a connotation to it, because it's so accessible for everybody to get into, like you said. So, yeah, I can see that. But I think, for me anyway, the ease of understanding that it brings by saying I do a podcast is better than explaining what kind of talk show it is.
So talk show is yours, though.
Your cousin could say that he's in a band, right? And maybe he gets together on the weekends and jams, and they drink beers, and they hang out, and just, old uncle's getting sweaty.
Right.
But then again,
Is that the band name?
Yeah. Uncle's getting sweaty.
I would be the first guy
I'm writing
in
it
the
down.
front row.
Go ahead.
But then again, Paul McCartney could say that he was in a band too.
Right.
And it's quite a different image in your mind of like, oh yeah, his band was called the Beatles.
Yeah.
And they weren't just drunk uncles sweating in a basement.
Yeah.
I will give it to you that talk show sounds more refined. Even if you have to then explain it, it does sound elevated. So, okay, so jump in. So, I assume that everybody listening has an idea, because in our space, the people that we talk to, you are also in that space, and I would say you're probably the number one guy here. Like, I don't know that if you're talking about like alternative poster or whatever that subculture is, because it's kind of a bit of a subgenre of, say, art or whatever. I think you're that guy. So it's possible everybody's already familiar with you, but why don't you go ahead and kind of jump off and give like a brief Wikipedia page about who you are?
Well, who I am, my name is Mark Brickey, and I'm from Kentucky, and my whole life, I always admired my dad. My dad's a truck driver who just recently retired, and I admire my dad in a way where I wanted to do everything the opposite of my dad. And so he went to work, drove a truck, and came home and just complained and complained and complained and complained. He hated his job. He didn't think that he'd made enough. You know, he didn't enjoy what he did. And my dad, there's only 20 years, well, actually 19 years and 362 days between me and my dad. And so obviously he, because he had sex with my mom. just caught myself. That's how it happens. I was gonna swear, but I'm going clean tonight because he and my mom fornicated. I came around. And so my dad was shortchanged of a lot of personal discovery and exploration. And so when the old man would come home and complain, I listened to it, even though he thought nobody was paying attention. I paid attention to every detail. I thought about it. And even though my dad is completely my hero, because we were destined to be just lower class white trash, and he got us right into the beginning of what you would consider middle class. So anytime you can jump a rung in society, that's a huge accomplishment. Yeah, the first thing you do is you divide and conquer. My dad took us away from our trashy family, put us in a different part of town, sort of cut off all the ties and tried to he wanted more for his kids. And so I realized that this man worked hard doing something he didn't enjoy, and he put his children and his family completely first. And those are all very heroic personality traits. And then I did the exact opposite. I decided to forever be a kid, still refer to myself as a kid, even though I'm 42 years young. And I've lived my whole life about personal discovery, and I've lived 9 lives. And that's why I'm good at podcasting, because if I sit across from a musician, a small business owner, an artist, an illustrator, a marketer, someone in the entertainment business, I've done all those things. And so my life's experience is my true value as a person, and how I can basically hang out with anybody and sort of understand what the weight of being them is. So if you want to listen to my show and learn about, people's origin stories, how they got started, and like the things that they physically do, it might not be the right place for you, because if I'm going to talk to somebody, I'm going to summarize what the hard part of being them is and work through that with them, as well as enjoying their victories and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I've kind of done it all. And being in a talk show is a kind of a great place to end it all, because it takes all this life experience. I put it to work 200 times a year for the show that I do every Monday through Thursday. And it all starts with my very first great memory. And I have a very rough childhood because my mom's a horrible person. But one of my first great memories was a rainy day. It was in the summer, and I was in, I think maybe like second or third grade. And we were hanging out indoors, and there was like a chest full of like clothes or whatever. And I took all the clothes out and I got behind it, and I was doing some sort of a character, and I made everybody laugh. And I held on to that moment and just kept going further and further on making people laugh. And around that time, we got our first VCR, and every night my dad and I would record the David Letterman show. We actually had a tape, and it was my responsibility to make sure that tape was in there, and the VCR would go off at 11:30 every night. And that's before talk show started at 11:35. Big difference. So we would do that. I'd take the tape out the next day. My mom would tape her soap operas and blah, 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 blah. And on the weekends, me and my dad would watch 5 hours of Letterman. And we might not always watch the guests, but we'd always watch the first 30 minutes. And I just remember looking at Dave and just thinking, man, that's got to be the greatest job in the world. And then I got into listening to talk radio, and I thought, that's got to be a great job. Everybody else is grinding. They're going off to work. Everybody else has come home from a long day. And your job is to entertain them while they're going off to war. You know, while they're getting ready to go there, you get them pumped up, you get them laughing, you get them thinking, and you make them think that today's the day that they take charge and they make a difference in their life. And so when I look back at the very, very beginning of how I fell in love with entertainment and humor, and I look at where I'm at now, which I hope to be sort of like the last chapter of what I do professionally, it all feels like it was meant to be, even though through many of my lost years and being a horrible person and making bad decisions, it didn't seem like it was all going to come together quite as beautifully as it did. And to sort of summarize all this up, when I got to be in my 30s and I formed my first real business, I mean, I'd worked for myself, but, you know, you just kind of throw names and ideas at the wall. And before viral was a thing, there was this idea like, I'm going to do this and it'll catch on. But that doesn't work. You know, you got to do something that's true and organic to you. And then other people see it as the pure thing that it is. Yeah. It's sort of the first real great accomplishment in my professional life was when we started our business called Hero. And to tie things together even more, I was very influenced by Shepard Fairey, who was just on the show last week. Yeah. And he had Obey. And I thought I really want to break my business down into 4 letters because 4 letters is symmetric. It commands attention, and it's a really great place to start. And I thought about my dad, and I thought about the word hero, and I thought that was a really good way to pay tribute to the guy who basically, by showing me how to do everything the opposite of him, I've lived one of the greatest lives that I know. And I bring that to the show every day because I think the one thing that everybody has, which is their greatest contribution to give, is their life story. And to have captured 600 of those is a complete honor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
all right, guys, it was nice being on your show. I will. I'll talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Good day. Good design.
Talk to us a little bit about that, like that lost period from what you were doing there. Then what brought you to actually starting the podcast? How do you get there?
Whoa, that's a big slice of the time pie.
Yeah.
Because I left home at 17.
Okay.
So I was a senior in high school, living on my own, which is both great because you have no fear of adults anymore. But it's horrible because you have no one guiding you on what to do. So, you know, I know what it's like to pawn a mountain bike to try to pay your rent because you're a senior in high school and you probably should be living with adults.
Right.
And I know what it's like to hang out all night long, not homeless. Like, you know, I've seen for real homeless people. And I hate when people are like, I'm homeless, I'm crashing on couches. If you got a couch to crash on, you're not homeless.
Yeah.
But I've definitely done that thing where you don't have a place to go and you're kind of going from place to place.
Sure.
And I tried to rough it out one night, and the last people that were hanging out was a bunch of skinheads. And I thought, you know what? I'm an open-minded guy. I can always hang out with people that see things differently than me and bond with them over it and respect their beliefs, but also not bend my own beliefs. But when you hang out in a basement full of racist skinheads, about 45 minutes later, you're like, yeah, there are some people that I can't give that olive branch
You're
to.
questioning some life choices.
I don't want this
point.
ground.
Yeah. They had a black dog and they had a name for the dog, and I was like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm not going to tolerate that. You know, that's crossing a line for me. And so, you know, I've been a bad guy to girls
the dog's name was
because
Cliff, by the way.
What's that?
The dog's name was Cliff. You just hated the name Cliff.
Yeah, I was like, Cliff Huxtable, odd name for a dog. Well, everybody loves that guy. He's innocent. But, you know, when you've got a hole inside of your heart because you've been abandoned by your real mom and you haven't seen her for years, and your stepmom is a post-depression kid who's just paranoid and literally, you know, I grew up in the type of household where I got good grades. I had perfect attendance other than when I got kicked out for fighting. But, you know, here I am. Most parents would die to have a kid with my type of grades, my type of discipline, and my sort of willingness to please adults. And I go, hey, can I go see, I wanted to go see the hardcore band Instead play at the skate park. And I was told no. And I said, why not? And the answer was, you've been having too much fun lately. And that still has stuck with me. And I set my niece down, my sister's daughter, great kid who's getting into art. And I abused my AID powers by going over to the artist Becky Cloonan and go, hey, I've got a newly teenage niece who's really into illustrating. Can you give me some titles that are great for female empowerment? Because I don't know anything about that, but I know that's your world. So Becky Cloonan sent me over like 20 titles. I went to Amazon, bought all 20 of them and sent them to her for Christmas. Nice. And she was just pulling out this box of diamonds. And then for her Christmas or for her birthday gift a month later, I showed her who Becky Cloonan was. And I said, that's the woman that picked out your Christmas gifts for you. And that's somebody who you should follow in her footsteps because she's a real hero for a young lady. But, you know, when you've got a hole in your heart and you're missing it and you know, you have no memories of anybody ever reading you a bedtime story. You have no memories of any adults ever telling you that they love you. You will find weird things to fill that hole with. And I'm straight edge, 42 years old. I've never drank. I've never smoked. I've never done any drugs. But I did have an obsession or a fondness of women. And you say that and people think, oh, this is a guy who's probably had sex with a lot of girls. That's not true. You can form relationships with people. Like when I was in a band for 10 years and every night on tour, I would find a girlfriend. And I wouldn't do anything physically, but I would get lost in that 80s love story of we just walked around the St. Louis arches and held hands. And I love the idea of falling in love, but I wasn't available to give myself to anybody.
Sure.
And I think, you know, obviously having sex with a girl and then not calling her back is a despicable thing. But making someone think that you're in love with them and then not being is got to be a really close second. And I did that for a long time, and I'm not proud of it. But you know, here I sit, 14 years with the same woman, been married for 10 years, and I've just done a lot of things that I feel were in a pretty despicable way, and I've been able to right a lot of wrongs. And when you've kind of been in the gutter, you can recognize somebody who's there, but you also can have conversations with people where you're like, yeah, man, I understand your world. Like, you know, you're in this band and everybody wants a piece of you. And there's a power there, but there's also sort of a blind spot there that you're not seeing. So, you know, to go from there to the podcast is kind of hard because it was just so much heavy living.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know, if I want to boil it down to something that's maybe a little bit more digestible, after 2 decades of doing commercial artwork, I realized that, every 6 months, every 12 months that my job wasn't getting easier, that it was getting more difficult. And that was scaring me because there were certain things that I wanted, like a savings account and like a retirement account. And, you know, like just these crazy ideas that I had about, you know,
security.
Not driving a Tesla, but just knowing that if I got sick, I could cover the rent for a month.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see, you know, I didn't see my life looking like I could ever have as much as an electrician, you know, financially. And so then I just decided that, you know, maybe my spot in this scheme of, you know, the creative pursuit for a career was to take all this life experience, to take my experience of being an entertainer, because people really were responding to my show. And I'm like, maybe there's more power on being on the sidelines. And I understand that to the new generation, there's a whole new way that the rules have got to be written because they're learning a whole new game that what me and the old dogs did. But I think giving them as much of this information as fast as possible puts tools in their tool belt that help them to rebuild whatever the world of creativity looks like. And I feel very stressed out for young people today because I feel like the basic designer or artist job is going to be irrelevant, much like the steel workers and the coal miners. Like automation is the enemy. And if you take a 10-year-old kid and give them an iPad, they can do many of your jobs. Yeah. And so I'm trying to lean the audience into learning how to work for themselves, learning how to diversify the way that they earn, and also become skillful and specialized. Because if you become so good at something, no one can ever replace you. And that's why I'm a podcaster, because I'm the best at this.
So were you like, because you mentioned, you know, imagining, oh, this is just, that's got to be the best job ever when you're younger. And then, so transitioning now to, is that literally like a dream that's in the back of your head all the time? Is that something that you just kind of had as a kid, forgot about it, and then like picked back up a couple decades later? Or was it literally like something that kept nagging at you, like this could be a way forward, or at least this would still be an amazing kind of life pursuit?
That's a really great question, and one that nobody's ever asked me before. And I think that we all have dreams. Like one of my dreams that has come true is that I dated this girl for a while, and her mom and dad had a lake house in Nolan Lake, Kentucky. And we would go down there on the weekends, and I thought, man, having a lake house, living on the water, what a great idea. And that was a goal that I set for myself around 19. And it's not that I own a lake house, but one day I was walking my dog down to the beach, which is 5 blocks from my house, and I realized, oh, you got your lake house. And I think that it's really interesting how you set these sort of dreams, and if you really love them and they're really in the back of your head, you subconsciously make decisions based on acquiring those dreams. And so I was in a band because it's way easier to be in a band than it is to be David Letterman. Although technology has changed that. But I was in a band, and the reason why I thought that the band was ready to come to an end is because I found that I was enjoying the moments between the songs more than playing the songs. I realized one night, if I go up on stage tonight and I have like 5 things prepared, I could probably get the crowd to laugh even more. And so then when we would be on tour, driving from destination to destination, all I was doing was writing a new monologue in my head. And I thought it would be horrible to repeat jokes. And so I'd write a whole new script every night, go on stage, execute that, and do that. And if you try to be funny when you're doing main support for the Misfits, that is unlike any challenge of my life.
Tough crowd.
Tough crowd. And I would always go, oh, it's funny that you're making fun of me, but you're the one who's 22 and dressed like a raccoon.
So I want to ask this question. So just to take it back, Luke asked about the lost time or whatever, and you talked about your obsession with some things, and you have another obsession, and it's maybe a happier obsession, and it's your love of Disney.
Okay, so
right?
what if you guys just sent somebody else a message and said, let's get out of this darkness and let's go over to Disney, right? Is that how this works?
Segue.
No. I'm trying to shape this here, because there is this other piece of it that if anyone's listened to you ever, they know you, or they follow you on Instagram. I mean, you, Brickey Land, right? This is a thing for you.
Brickey
Disney
Mouse
is a thing. I've got a print on my wall right here of what you did.
Thank you.
For the mouse. So tell us about that. Where does the love of that come from? And then tell us, inevitably about how you got to end up working with them.
Okay, well, the love is different than the work, but the love affair is this. I come from a neighborhood that is not a place where you come from to succeed. And I can literally say that I have friends that are both dead and in jail that I grew up with. Yeah. And when I think about the ability of, I got this little card right here that says I can go into Disneyland 24 hours. Well, the hours that they're open. I can go into Disneyland 365 days a year. To me, this card is a symbolism of how far I've come. That just 12 miles down the road from my house, 30 minutes in a car, is the happiest place on earth, where it's the best designed city you'll ever go into, because it's not a real city. And Disneyland is superior than all the other parks because it has a major restriction of land. And everybody knows that all good art is birthed from restriction. And that's why the Trump administration is going to birth a lot of great artists. But the idea, or my love affair of Disneyland, is every time I go there, and I've been there now 142 times, I always get choked up. Now, I don't always produce tears, but I always get the lump in my throat. And part of that is the little kid that didn't get to go to Disneyland with his family is there tonight. And he's going to be there next week and the week after that. And it just feels like cheating the system. You're not supposed to be able to have that much fun. Because remember, I was raised under the rules,
right? Too
much fun. And so I go to the place where everything is all about fun and everything is about great experiences. And so for me, being able to go there is literally like the biggest FU to society of I've found a way
of where you came from.
Exactly. And there are friends through Facebook that look at my life through that lens and think, oh my God, this, like, he's made it. And part of it is the constant Disneyland. And when you go to Disneyland a lot, there's a lot of people that give you shit about it, and you know, judge you for it. And I just like to point out, like, I don't go there and ride Pirates of the Caribbean thinking that it's going to be different. You know,
Yeah.
when people ask me, what's your favorite attraction? I say the park bench, because I can just literally sit in the ambiance of it and soak it up. And I never forget when I see people walk by, I'm like, this is their once in a lifetime trip to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my 142nd. So suck on this.
It never gets old.
It never gets old. So how I got to work with them, I'll break this down in a really quick way. I've learned how to flirt with the universe. And what that means is you tell your heart, well, actually your heart tells you what you want, and then the brain makes decisions based on that intellectual or emotional want. And the way that you do this is if you want to work for Disneyland, you move to California, you do pop-up shows like I do, craft festivals, and every time somebody gives you an assignment, whether it's a gig poster for horrible bands, or, hey, we want you to be in our Spoke Arc Bike show, everything that comes your way, you pretend like the client is Disneyland. And you build it under their rules, using their rules of design, the way that they construct things, and you build everything to look like it's for Disneyland. And then one day, someone will walk into your booth, they'll look at your work and go, huh, we should have them in our gallery. We should hire them. And that's exactly how I got it. Now, I didn't plot it out and send postcards or anything. I just followed my heart, wanted to do this work. My mind was like the challenge of trying to do things in that regard. So if you asked me to do a print of a bicycle, I looked at my bicycle upside down and said, you could turn a bicycle into an amusement park. There's 2 giant Ferris wheels. The crank looks like a little ride that would make you go sick. The bike stand is a great place to go buy a hot dog. Like, you just build it out and you put that out into the world, and then people will hire you to do it. And my whole idea of flirting with the universe, like, I love the idea of being David Letterman. And on my show, I'm serious. I can bond with people. I'm snarky. I make jokes and don't go out of my way to tell you that I'm joking. You have to figure that out. That's why some people don't like me, because they don't understand sarcasm. And, you know, I flirted with that. We tried it, and it worked out because it was meant for me to do it. So flirting with the universe, you at home, whatever it is that you want to do, simply give yourself permission now to start doing it. And eventually the powers that be will either acknowledge it and bring you in the loop, or you'll create something that's even bigger and better than that.
Okay, yeah. I love that. And the thing is, even for me, like, this is very, very dense with obvious, like, wisdom of just years and years and years of living it. So this is all incredible stuff. We are, oh my gosh, we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to ask one more question, I think, before we have to transition into finals.
Let's do 2 episodes. Keep talking.
Okay, fair enough. So, but I want to, you just mentioned that some people may not get it as far as your sarcasm. And I did actually want to take a second to touch on your persona, but I want to relay a personal story first. And before I relay this story, I want to oddly enough tell you that my wife said hello. She just wanted to make sure I said that. I forgot until this moment. I feel like I should tell you.
Real quick. Your wife Walmarts more efficiently than any woman I've ever known. Most of the time, and this is where I'm going to be a sexist, most of the time when you go into a Walmart, the guy's like, I want to get it done. I want to get out of here. And it might be the wife that's like, oh, Easter baskets. The kids need Easter baskets, Daryl. And your wife walked in, knew what we were looking for, asked one person, figured out he had no idea what he's talking about, went to a second one. She had us Walmarted up in 90 seconds. It's like, somebody's already married you, but you are the perfect woman to take to a store because you are more efficient than me. And I was the one who was like, oh, Easter baskets. Look at these. They're on sale.
It's because it wasn't Target. That's the only reason, because we have... It doesn't matter. Okay, everybody knows
Walmart is for functionality. Target is for shopping.
That was the first time I've been into a Walmart in years, because I not only believe in Target as a brand, but I have the Target dog. The Bull Terrier is the superior breed. And don't give me crap. I rescued one dog. All right. I did my goodwill, and now I'm going to buy the dog I want, because what's this whole, like, if you're a responsible dog owner, you got to take every dog orphan that exists. Like, I did my time. Now I have the dog that I want. If you don't like
Frito,
that, too bad.
Don't act like you didn't try to get Frito.
Frito, man. I was so close, but guess what? I rescued a dog this weekend. Her name was Coco. We found her in her yard. She was dirty as could be. We found her. There's this What's Up app or something. There's some app for like what's happening in your neighborhood. And we got her back to our owners. But I was like, yeah, this is redemption for letting Frito go. And Coco, another food name. So I'm on a roll with food
Frito
dogs.
is on the Shepherd Fairy episode, right? So if someone doesn't know the story, it's like the whole intro into that. So
which I thought was a good way to understand, like everybody, Shepherd Fairy, that's a unique person to be, And I felt like a lot, and the reason why I chose that monologue is like, you would have no idea what the weight of him is until you actually hear it from him, And if Frito would have just understood me, Frito would have the lap of luxury.
That's right, and he missed it. So I bet I was going to ask you about your persona, because I frankly wasn't introduced to you until I was physically introduced to you. Like I knew who you were, but I hadn't listened to your show, and so like my first interaction with you was at Creative South this year, and then it was after that I went and listened to the show. But in like super nice guy, incredibly gracious, like a lot of fun to be around. It like.
Thank you.
And you come across as incredibly genuine, all those stuff, all those things. Now you've mentioned that some people just don't get the way you come across. They see it as being like maybe negative or whatever it is. So, how do you balance that? Do you ever have this feeling of like I promise I'm a good guy, or do you just not care? Or
I don't care. I don't care. Here's the thing. I got a microphone right in front of my mouth. And the moment that I start paying attention to that it's there and people are listening, and I worry about how they digest the data that I give them, then it's done and it's over. I am more honest than what most millennials can handle. And I'm fine with that, because I think the world is missing a little bit of tough love and a little bit of grit. So if people look at me as Uncle Mark, who's a little bit crazy, uncles can be a little wild at times,
Sweaty Uncle Mark, yeah.
Sweaty Uncle Mark playing in the basement. And so, I just made a joke where my best friend in this world was a dog named Baxter that I was lucky enough to have for 17 years. And the tops of my hands are tattooed in his memory. And Baxter was my Momo, my crazy, wild old Momo. She thought Baxter was my guardian angel. And she'd be like, Marky, when I look in his eyes, I see daddy's eyes. This is a woman at 70, still referring to her dad as daddy. Mm-hmm. By the way, his name, Alton B. Cotton, sounds like a character out of a Coen brother film.
Yep, exactly.
But, I just made a joke. I adopted one. Now I buy my dog, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of people that are like, how dare he? That is a hot button topic for some people that I just said that I don't have to adopt a dog if I don't want to. I don't backtrack that. I don't break that down and explain it. Like, if you hang out with me long enough, you'll realize that there's an incredible amount of, I think the best, like, some people might say the best thing that I can do is be funny. I think the best thing I can do is offer empathy. And I really try to understand my guests. I try to understand their pain. And I just spent 6 hours this weekend going line through line, working on an interview, because my guest was very nervous to do the interview. And in the interview, to make him talk, I gave him a lot of audible signs. Yeah, great, awesome, cool. Because when you do that, people hear the feedback and they talk to you more. But for you at home, that's annoying. So I went through and deleted every single one of those out. So when people listen to the interview, it sounds like he's talking on his own. And I did a lot of coaching, and I take all of that out, because my job is to sell the person that sits across from me. They're giving me their time. They're giving me their stories. That's the least that I can do for them. So if people want to, hear one little snippet and get all bent out of shape about it, then they're probably not my kind of people in the first place. And to worry about making everybody happy, that's the moment where you're never going to win. You're not going to be happy, and your project will be a failure. So I kind of take it as a badge of honor that the show isn't for everybody, but for the people that do listen, they really listen and they really seem to love it. And I have a very, very strong connection with the audience, and that is the true value of all of this.
So let's kind of keep that train of thought going as far as now moving to your guests. That's who you're focused on, and maybe let's shift this. Okay, so I would love to hear your opinion on this, because this is like a non-fully formed thought in my head somewhere, And I think that maybe you can bring some clarity to it. And that's that if you talk to people, you said you talked to 600 people, that a lot of people's experiences are kind of the same. I mean, regardless of the medium, whatever, they're kind of going through a lot of the same struggles and whatever, they're kind of hitting the same beats. And whether it's someone like Shepard Fairey or like, the guy down the street, or whether it's you and you feel like an amateur, you're probably struggling with a lot of the exact same emotions.
Absolutely.
So maybe if you could I don't know if either
How do I differentiate it?
Well, I think it's like, what does that do for you personally when you kind of start seeing everybody around having the same thing? Is that encouraging to you, or does that somehow kind of like let you down on a level? And then how do you convince someone that like, it's cool? Like, yeah, you're an amateur and you feel like you're not that good, but I promise you're in great company because you're in company with all the people, like in the same company with all the people you look up to.
Well, okay. So my rule is that I try to make every interview different than the ones before it. So if I realize that I'm catching on one of the common themes, like imposter syndrome, I try to really not just stop the conversation there, but get into their specific cause of pain. Why are they feeling as an imposter, even though they have all the math around them to show them that they're a tremendous success? Why do they still feel empty and vacant inside? And I think that the number one thing that my show's been able to do that's made it, the amount of success that it has, is that my peers can listen to the show and it's sort of a warm embrace that all the other big dogs are just as lost as they are. But then the new guy, the new gal can listen to it and realize that there's really not that much of a difference between them and Shepard Fairey, just that Shepard Fairey's client is President Obama and their client is their sweat uncle's plumbing company, And so I think that it doesn't discourage me to realize that everybody's feeling these similar themes. I think that it makes me realize that, and I love the idea of, I'm not a dad and I don't plan on ever being one, but there's a very special thing that happens when you see that there's a pregnant woman in the room. As a man, you're trained to just like, okay, there's a pregnant woman in the restaurant. I know she's sitting over there. And if I walk by her, I should get a door for her, or I should do this, or I should do that. And I love seeing people take the time to help out a stroller or hold the door open for a pregnant woman, because it reminds me that we are an animal and that we are a tribe, and that there is something in us that says, okay, put all the big elephants around the baby elephants and they'll survive whatever's coming our way. And so when I do these interviews and I realize that there's these same themes, it makes me realize that, as special as we all think we are, because hopefully our art and our talents all look very different, we have unique styles. At the end of the day, there's a core belief system, there's a core emotional system that's driving all of that. And so, sometimes the 3 problems we hit are your 3 problems and you're like high-fiving the radio. And then sometimes like, whoo, glad I'm not that kind of crazy. But one way or the other, it's always kind of relatable. And now that I've done it so often, it becomes even more fun for me because I can be like, okay, JP Connolly is riding high on doing the set design for The Voice for 13 seasons. Now, most people would interview him about doing the #1 TV show on NBC for 13 years. But because of my experience, I shift the conversation to, what are you going to do when this runs out? And how paranoid are you? Because you've won the lottery with this project. And as soon as I said that to him, he knew that the guy he was sitting across from understood his struggle. And he almost used it as a psychiatrist meeting to sort of map out, well, where do I go from here? Because I've been given tremendous success for being a set designer or a production designer. I can never remember all those Hollywood titles because they're all very close but very different. But he's essentially at the top of his game. And when you get to the top of your game, there's a new paranoid of, well, what do I do when this runs out? Where do I go from here? Because after you've tasted the good life, everything else would feel like a step backward. So that's kind of how I make the pivot. And I'm able to make that pivot because I have the life experience and the interview experience to know this is where the conversation goes, because that over there just seems like low-hanging fruit.
And so speaking of the shows and trying to make each one unique and trying to take, even if you're seeing a thread and trying to find the unique spin, or not even spin, but the unique piece of that makes that so personal for that person.
Yeah.
Your audience, obviously, you've seen a great deal of success. Your audience is bought in. The people that are your people, they are yours. They follow what you're saying. They love what you're doing. And that's, in a lot of ways, how you are able to do this as a career. Before we started this, I asked you a question about sponsorship and being able to do this as what you do. And you said it's mostly from your audience. So talk to us about what that looks like to be so much dependent upon the people who are listening to you, and what that looks like to actually, I mean, you have monetized that. That is actually a tangible thing, other than just, people like me.
Yeah.
No, people like you enough to help you live. So like, what is that process like?
Well, to explain it to people at home, imagine if every time somebody gave you a heart on Instagram, you saw money go into your bank account. How would that make you feel?
Right.
And okay, so it is the most humbling thing I've ever been able to accomplish, but it was also the scariest thing. And it really is an embodiment of, the biggest risk, the greatest reward. And I had to go through a mental stage of, if people don't pay for this, it has to go away. And so to offer it for payment was basically putting my dream out into the world and saying, I need you to validate this or it has to go away. And that was scary because, I got lucky that within 24 hours, I had enough people that signed up that I'm like, this is my job. But what if it didn't go that way? And that was the scariest 6 months ever. And I crafted my whole launch and release around getting to that moment where, I had to get people to validate it to make it real. And so the way that it works is I created a system called the Circle of Trust. And people that are a subscriber, they get bonus content from every episode. So basically I do an hour and a half interview. It breaks off somewhere around 45, 55 minutes. To hear that second part, you got to be a member of the Circle of Trust. And then after 30 days, everything goes behind the paid wall. So if you sign up, you get access to nearly 600 episodes. And so I had to create a value where there was no value. And that's a very hard thing to do in business. But it worked. And it's weird because part of what people are buying is the companionship and the conversation, but they're also kind of buying into me and who I am. And it sometimes is a little bit stressful, and I'm a little bit like, I don't know if I want to show somebody what I'm doing right now, because if they take it out of context, it looks like I'm giving this guy $9.99 and he's eating at a 5-star restaurant on the side of a cliff on the Pacific Ocean. And that wasn't me that was cursing. That was the character that I just did.
Yeah,
so,
we got that.
So there's a little bit of that weirdness where that the people that are hanging out with you are also the people that are putting money in your bank account. But I've also come to learn with the whole cat and mouse game that we play, must be nice. That's what they tell me all the time. Must be nice, must be nice. But I've come to realize that through many of them, they are genuinely happy for my success. And I think that one of the things I set out to do was I wanted to make sure that I was a character on the show. And I wanted to make sure that my life story and my struggle was one of the through lines, because do you want to watch The Sopranos, where at the end of every 55 minutes, you're on the edge of your seat and you want to watch the next one? Or do you want to watch Law and Order SVU, where they wrap it up every night and you don't need to watch it again, And I like that my show has through storylines where you want to come back and maybe hear how this thing went for Billy, for Sean, for myself, for DKNG, all my regulars.
Right.
Sure.
So that's kind of, I hope that answers the question. It's definitely a very, very weird thing, but I'll give everybody this little bit of advice. I could have put all my time and energy into advertising and sponsors, and that would have been a wasted amount of time and energy, because instead I put all my time and energy into the content, making the content as good as possible, staying up late, editing, always writing notes, always thinking about how the next show should sound. And so instead of just getting good at selling ads, I got good at doing my job. And if all this falls apart tomorrow, I could show my editing skills. I could show my hosting skills. Like, I've had meetings with people. Like, I'm equipped to go elsewhere if this goes away. And that's because I put all of my energy in the part of this that makes the most sense for me. And also for the guy at home. I mean, the guy at home who's willing to pay doesn't want to hear the ads get better. They want to hear the interviews and the content get better.
So how far into the show were you before you rolled out Circle of Trust?
We had done 45 old school episodes, the original 45. And those 45 episodes we did over the span of like 2.5 years. And the slow rollout was I started doing this thing over the summer of 2014 called AID AM. And I started doing it on Mondays, like TGIM, thank God it's Monday. I'm happy to be at work because I do what I love. And I did it that way. And I kind of broke apart from Billy and James, who were my regular hosts, and we just did a show whenever we could. And I was trying to perfect, can I record, get it out fast? How can I produce a show that's more efficient? I was also trying to go without co-hosts. You know, any one of you three guys, imagine just doing it by yourself. And it was kind of like, you know, the guy sitting across from me is my co-host for the day.
Yeah.
And some people are great co-hosts, and other people have no business being on a microphone ever. And it's your job to dictate that relationship and to learn it early on and to run the table. So I was able to experiment. So that happened in the summer of 2014. And then I did the hardest thing ever. I did it for free, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And to make 30 podcasts on your own backbone with no money coming in and still holding down the fort of doing your art company, packing up and shipping orders, working on the weekend and doing shows was really, really hard. But I'll tell you how I got to that moment. I went out and did this small tour called the Failure Tour. Went out in a car by myself, went to DC, West Virginia, Cleveland, Louisville, Nashville. And I was just driving around in a car by myself for 5 days, doing the show live in different spots. Sometimes there'd be, 100 people. Sometimes there'd be 15 or 5 people. But I was out driving in the car. It was alone time to figure out, is this what I really, really want to do? Rewinding back to my dad, I was talking on the phone with my dad. He's like, hey, my dad understands nothing about art or being in the band. He never saw the band play once. Never hung any of my art in the house. Like it's like, I know everything about trucking. He knew nothing about my life. But I'm driving down the road and I can still remember what it looked like. I was in West Virginia and the way that the sun was hitting the trees and the mountain. I have a very great memory and I can see this moment. My dad goes, so what do you think? You think you're going to be able to turn this podcast thing into a real job? I go, I don't know, Dad. It's the cards are stacked up against me. iTunes will let you sell everything but a podcast. And I don't know if I can do it or not. He goes, well, it'd be a real shame if you couldn't because you're really good at it. And it seems like people really like the way that you do it. So I hope that it works out for you because it seems like you should do it. That's the first professional encouragement I ever got from my dad in my whole life because he listens to the show. He's Team Billy and he's a truck driver. And what do truck drivers know? They know good talk radio when they hear it.
Yeah.
And so going on that road trip, staying with people, meeting people face to face and seeing what it meant to other people. It was like, I didn't know how to take care of myself until I got a dog. Learning how to care for something else teaches you how to care about yourself. You guys, some of you guys are dads, you probably know that.
Yeah.
And seeing how much people love this project only made my love for it even more impactful and made me realize this is a fight that's worth fighting. And so November 14th, I said, all right, here's the deal. You guys have heard the show. I've done 60, 70 episodes now. I've been doing it daily. I need you to go over and sign up for the Circle of Trust if you want this to stick around. Mm-hmm. And I woke up to 5 subscriptions and my subscription company cut me off because they're like, it's a new account. Too many people are signing up. we need to validate it. And I was like, you've got to turn it back on. People will not come back on Monday. Please. Like, what do you need me to fax you? Like, I'm a real person. Like, this is not a terrorist scheme. Like, I'm not ISIS. I love America. I'll kill anybody for America. And I got them to turn it back on
right now. And
then, because my email was like, subscription, and then tons. I can't sign up. This thing doesn't work. And I was like, oh my God, no. And so with the real stressful phone call, I got it flipped back on, and then they started coming through. And that night, me and NG from DKNG, we were in San Francisco, and we went out to eat. And I said, hey man, I think I just came to the Silicon Valley and dropped myself a technology company. Put another one in the resume.
So, okay, not to like, would you say that conversation with your dad on some level gave you permission to move forward?
I don't think that it gave me permission to move forward, but I think it reinforced the weight of what I was doing, you know? And let's retrace it. I've been in a band. I worked at a record label. I've created my own posters, prints, t-shirts, stickers, books. You know, I've worked on countless music marketing projects. I've been around enough stuff to know what true momentum looks like. This project had momentum right out of the gate. And when you catch lightning in a bottle, you hold on to it and you find a way to make it work for you. So my wife and I's anniversary is in May. In May of 2014, when we were driving down to the desert, was when the idea that I came up with for the subscription service. And it took me till November to get it out. And that was possibly the scariest 6 months of my professional life, because I was gambling on my dream. And if it didn't happen, I don't even want to think about it.
Well, because that's setting the value. Like, if someone won't pay for it, then you can't argue it's valuable, right?
Exactly. And that's the problem with making hardcore bets, is because you're gambling everything that you're going to win. And I don't lose in life. I make mistakes. I mess up plenty, but I don't lose in life. I've never lost in life. I've never had to quit something because society made me. I've always walked away from everything because I wanted to do it. And this was a time when I didn't know if the streak would stay alive.
Yeah. So this is perfect to lead into what's next. So you have done AID for, 600 odd episodes.
And I'm so bored of it.
And you're branching out, right? So you're adding, Brickey Leaks, and you have a couple other shows. So what's next for AID? Where is this going?
That's a great question. So here's what I found out. There is a ceiling on how big you can get a show that talks about art and design when you don't do it in an academic way. A lot of people, they wander into our show and they're like, what is this profanity? Like, they're not talking about design. Like, some people don't get that it's a good hang that eventually gets to great business advice or career advice, design advice.
Sure.
Right.
And I think that it's very important that it doesn't sound like a college lecture. And when we came on the scene, that was way different than anything. And that was kind of the real pearl of wisdom of what we did.
Yeah.
So you can only get so big. And on the flip side, I can only talk about typography so many times before I'm going to take a letter J, put it around my neck, and jump off of something. And so the idea was, what if Adventures in Design became the AID network? And what if within this 200 episodes a year, I started to create within my own space? So one of the early shows was a no-brainer, DKNG show. Every other month, my good friends, Dan Culkin, Nathan Goldman, come on, and we look at everything that's gone out the door. And we retrace the steps on what project led to that project. How did they get paid? Small, medium, large, extra large. Talking about it as a t-shirt size. Gives you an idea without the boys spilling their budgets. So that's a reality show. That's great. But then there were other things that I wanted to do that were a little bit more ambitious, like the Start Today podcast with my good friend Biggie, who's a very, very successful music manager. Manages Circa Survive, Every Time I Die, Terror, Against the Buried in Me, The Fall. I don't know. Those metal band names get too long. But on that show, The first 30 minutes of it is a documentary. It's a hardcore history documentary where we take Gorilla Biscuits on the first one, Minor Threat on the second one, and I get to make a fully produced 30-minute documentary. For every minute you hear, I spend 30 minutes producing it. It's a long time to put it together. And in the second part, we go line by line from these old songs, and we interpret like they're the scrolls, like they're verses from the Bible. How did this music shape us and so many young men to become this wild generation of Generation X entrepreneurs? All of my friends from hardcore and punk rock that went on to do other things are very, very successful.
Yeah.
So that's a very different show, but it's not too far off from everything else that we're doing. I also have a show that's reoccurring called Mickey Leaks, where once a month, me and my friend Sean Mort from England, we talk about one aspect of Disneyland, but not as a, I'm going to go there and ride the Guardians of the Galaxy, bro, but the business model of what Disneyland does. And what I like about that is you're taking a company with unlimited money, unlimited resources, and looking at when everything is yours, when the world is your oyster, this is what you can do. How can we carve off a little bit of that for the guy at home that only has $1,500 to make something for his brand? So as these, and there's a couple other shows that are pretty wild that are going to be coming out. Some are surprises and some I've been public with. But the idea is to keep it fun for me, keep it fun for my regular listeners. And a lot of people go, you put out too many episodes, I can't listen to them all. Well, that's fine. Because all you have to do is just go once a year, I want to listen to that one. And I've met your demand. But what about the person that works by themselves? What about the mother of two that when the kids go down and she's got 2 hours to do design, she wants people, like-minded adults, to hang out with her, talk to her like she's an adult, have fun with her, and give her some good business advice, some good design advice, and get a couple of laughs along the way. So the idea is to keep it fun, to keep it broadening, and also I'm learning new skills about me and what's possible to do in the realm of podcasting. I got something I'm working on that I want to release in July. It's incredibly ambitious. I talked about it with you in Georgia, and it's even taken a different change. I've even twisted it even more. And when this thing comes out, I'm going to be really, really proud of it. And it has nothing to do with the circle of trust. I don't even have a way to monetize it. I'm back to doing something for the love of doing it. And I know that that is enough flirting with the universe that some way or the other, I'm going to get laid.
Do you ever go, is there ever a plan to go visual, do video? Or is it all audio?
So video is the easiest way to look like a cheap whore. And I exist perfectly in radio of the mind. Listen to my voice. My voice sounds so good to you right now. You know what I'm doing right now? I'm slowly pulling this Trenta iced coffee and I'm putting the straw in my mouth. And oh, it's so cold and creamy. I exist very well in your ear holes. Visually on a video, it would have to be produced a certain way.
The gig is up.
I'm a strong 7. Okay, ladies, I'm a strong 7, and I'm married.
I'll give you 7.2.
Thank you, sir. You're very generous. But
it's coming from 5. It's not that great.
Hey, man,
it smells like a 2, though. Keep going.
It's 2 big points. But there has been meetings and conversations about going into video, and I don't think AID transfers well into video, but I do think that there are abilities for my interview style and my personality. And so that's kind of Hollywood stuff where, there's big ideas. People tell you a lot of stuff and you just kind of go, that's great if it ever happens.
Yeah,
and
you can bring the personality. You don't want to be the producer necessarily.
Yeah. So when it goes into video, it'd be a different thing. But there is sort of, I'll let you guys in on a little something I'm toying around with that could maybe change things. I'm thinking about giving away all my printing equipment to one of my listeners, just giving all of my equipment to somebody. And then when there's nothing in our studio space at our home, maybe turning that into a TV set and seeing what happens.
There it is.
So,
you heard it here first, folks.
I took that the total wrong way
scoop.
because what I heard is that Mark doesn't own a television and just wants to get a television. So I heard like I can't fit a TV in here, so I got to get rid of all my printing equipment.
Finally get one of these newfangled machines.
Get a TV. I realize now I'm an idiot. That's not what you said.
I don't only own a television, but I have one sitting right here that's pumped into my computer, so I can watch TV while I'm working. Like, you want me to play some TV for you right now? I'll get it in this right recording right now. Get ready to bleep.
Yeah. So my question then, we're gonna start to transition here to what might be finals. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. You've posted a couple of things over the past year and a half. I imagine you are in this unique space where you have all of these artists, you have all of these incredibly talented people who you've interacted with from every different kind of outlet and media and all this stuff. But you have posted a couple of things that seems like they have stuck out to you. I imagine you get artwork, fan tribute stuff regularly.
Yeah, wild stuff. Some of it's amazing. Some of it's like, wow, what are you doing?
Right. There's been two specific ones that you've really honed in on. One is the one that you use now as kind of your promotional image, your profile image that Rich Kelly did for you, which seems incredible. Your likeness.
Rich Kelly did a portrait of me, and it's better than any photograph that could ever be taken because it captures all of my nuances in one warm-up illustration that he did. Yeah.
So then the other one is this, and I think maybe we'll sit on this one for a little bit longer. It's your friend and the guy that we know his work is amazing. Jason Edmiston did your dog. Oh, God. And this portrait that is just this amazing representation of your dog. Talk to us a little bit about when you received that, what went through your head? What are the emotions you're feeling in that moment?
So to rewind a little bit, Jason Edmiston, like many Canadians, are the nicest people that you'll ever meet. And I lived in Toronto for 4 years and I loved it. So Jason stayed at our house and he took a liking to Sari, and he's a big fan of Beth and what she does with Tasty Yummies. And he's just a really, really great guy. And, we're in LA, we could go do a million things, and he's totally cool hanging out in the living room, just, chewing the fat with the Brickleys. And so when we parted ways, he said, I'm going to send you guys a gift. What's your address? So I sent him the address, and something pops up, and I've already forgotten about it. I'm like, oh, Jason sent us something. So as I'm opening it up, it's covered in plastic. And it looked like it was constructed. And I'm like, oh, he probably just went to a market in Toronto and bought something funny. And so I'm opening it up. Beth's like, oh, what did he send you? And I saw what looked like it could possibly be a bull terrier. So I turned it around and I opened it up backwards because I wanted Beth to be surprised that he probably went to a night market, got some weird Chinatown ad with a bull terrier on it. And when I spun it around, Beth standing next to me, I go, oh my God, he painted Sari. He painted our dog. And we both immediately just our eyes welled up. We went into tears. And, I've always wanted to own an original painting from Jason. I've always wanted a painting of my dog. To get them both at the same moment and have it be a surprise, it was literally more than what your heart can handle. And, I'm a hardcore dog owner, and I've gotten into a bad spot with dogs. They're just like these emotional time bombs, and Sari's now going to be 7 years old. So we're more than likely, we're past the 50% mark. And I motivate that in a very bizarre way every day. If I don't feel like taking a walk, I'm like, she's not going to be here in 5 more years. And there's just a countdown going on in my head. And so to have this piece of artwork we're talking about Jason Edmiston. This painting could be worth $3,000 to $5,000, and he just gave it to us. And it just really, really humbled me. And Jason's one of those guys who listens to the show Monday through Thursday, and because we're good friends, he writes me every Friday to remind me that I'm not on the show or on the air. He's like, I don't have a show to listen to today, Mark. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do, Jason? Call you up and entertain you while you paint for the next 90 minutes?
Dance for me. Dance.
So Jason has heard many of the interviews way before they come out because he's like, hey, I'm painting all weekend. What do you got for me? And, this is a relationship that was formed through this show, and he is a real friend. And I'll give you another one, the little sticker that's on all of the covers.
Yeah.
That was a gift from Derek Castle. Derek Castle was excited to be on one of the early shows. And he goes, hey, Mark, hey, man, I hope you don't mind, man, but no, man, I don't mind. I just made this little logo. I just thought it would be so cool. Mark, I just thought it would be so cool to put that on there. So, I mean, the sticker itself is a gift. And, Sean Moore, who I love like a brother, and he comes over here every year. I met him through the show as well. So many of the people that are the regulars and have become my best friends are all people that I've met organically through the show. So it's pretty amazing how much it's changed my life outside of the professional effects, but just as the people that I'm friends with and the way that I live my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think one of the best ways that we could possibly begin closing this out is to just go through a round of low-hanging fruit.
Oh, what? What? You're done? I'll keep going, kid. I'll talk. Let's make it a battle royal.
Yeah, like 5 days a week.
Keep going, and one at a time. One person will fall out of the video, and another person will fall out of the video, and then here I'll stand, your intercontinental champion, your world champion, one half of the tag team champions. Here I stand with my belt, with my silver, with my medals, because no one can last longer. No one can podcast stronger than me, the man, Mark Brickey. I just stumbled on my own name and I won't even stop. That's right. It's Mark Brickey, one of the
Okay, well, we have our entire
That's why we call him the podcast,
closing
man.
segment. That's perfect. No, I do want to ask low-hanging fruit because people still love that. So people still eat that stuff up. That stuff gets picked, and so I want to go through a couple of those pieces.
Yeah.
So, okay.
People love fruit.
So here we go. These are just a couple quick ones. Do you have a piece of best design advice?
Yeah, the best of design advice is become really specialized at something. Whatever will separate you from the pack will be where you find your success. So if I was a young person right now trying to figure all this out, I would lean into whatever my successes are.
Perfect. Okay. Oh my gosh, don't dare draw a blank right now, mind.
Go ahead, fall out. There's
fine.
one down. There's
No,
one down.
no,
Keep
no,
going.
this is not me. I'm not the first one. I've got this. This is still good. Luke's going to edit this out. No one will ever know this happened. And I realize while I'm saying
No
that,
edits
that's not
tonight.
true.
No
None of
edits
that is
tonight.
true. It's fine. Okay.
But Mark's version is going to have the whole thing.
Yeah, it
so
doesn't matter. Do you have can you pinpoint a favorite moment during your show, during your 600 episodes?
No, I really can't because it's all just been so amazing. I mean, there's moments that come to me like every year I do a fundraiser, and this year I was able to take like $1,700 worth of stuff to the church that we go to every Tuesday where we feed homeless people here in Long Beach. And, one of the guys, my dude, Omar, who's such a great guy, he like looked at all of the stuff and he goes, I want to be able to serve the Lord like you just did. Like, how do I do this? And I'm like, man, I can't tell you how to do what I do. You can just know that you've probably served your God way more than I ever can, and it was just a weird moment where here's a guy that I just barely know. And he's just looking at my life and he just wants to get right to the finish line. I'm like, I can't tell you how that works. And in his mind, it probably was so impressive of what I was doing. And those are those little moments where you celebrate that victory and you let it validate just for a second. Like, I guess what I'm doing is kind of impressive to an outsider, and that was aside from just around the holidays, being able to help out. That was wild. That was a really cool moment.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that is awesome. Do you have a tool that you would recommend? So people are always asking about like tools you use. And so whether it's from the design side or podcast side, do you just have a tool that you would say, yeah, like this is going to really help what you do?
Well, I'll give you a couple of tools. The iPad Pro is great for illustrating. And if you use AstroPad, you can use it as a Cintiq. So it's a very affordable way to have a place where you can illustrate and also private browse. If you're going to podcast, I recommend, I use this little guy called the Tascam DR70D. It's this little guy right here. I can run 4 microphones into it. I can also run sound out to a PA. And so when I show up at colleges and I meet a sound guy, I'm like, all I need is 2 XLRs in your soundboard and I'll take care of everything else. And they're like, sweet. So that's kind of always be prepared and show it with all your tools and know that you can run your own show. And then the other tool that I would recommend people is a calculator and a calendar, because it's real easy to get intoxicated by opportunities. But before you say yes to everything, you should always do the math and see if it works out for you. And you should take that math over to a calendar and see if it really makes sense in your life, because time is the most valuable thing that everyone owns. And it's very easy to give it to the wrong people.
Okay, so I have a question. I'm going to jump in on Patrick's low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit, a masters
my next
of one.
question was going to be about that specific thing, where you get, I'm sure you get opportunities all the time. People see the personality that you have. You travel, you do things all over. What is an opportunity that you have turned down, the wildest opportunity that you've turned down in the last year or two?
Oh, man, that's weird, because I normally try to find a way to make things work. The wildest thing that I've turned down, God, I don't know. I hate to be lame and not have a good answer, but the last couple of years, everything has kind of worked out for me. Probably the weirdest thing that I ever had to turn down and say no to was when I stopped being in a band. That was one of the hardest things that I'd ever done, because I was in a band from 15 to 25. And I told myself, if you're not making all your money off of a band at 25, then you need to quit, because there's nothing sad than an old guy in a band that doesn't know when he should give up. And so I gave myself a 2-year extension. And after being that guy for 12 years, letting go of the band was going into not being that person anymore. And I like that guy and I like those accolades. And when I moved to Toronto and I was a nobody, I'm like, oh, I now understand that the last 10 years, every time I walked into a room, people were literally kissing my ass. And now I know how it feels to be a normal guy, and I don't like it. You know that's Superman, where he's like, look, I really like this chick named Lois. I'm getting rid of the powers. I'm going to be a regular dude. And then he went to a diner and got his ass kicked.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one of these low-hanging fruit questions, because if everybody's doing it, I'm going to do it.
Low-hanging fruit!
This is one from
We need
Doc
to get a clean
Reed.
version of that, by the way, just to kick off this. But go ahead, Luke. Continue.
This is from Doc Reed. He said, you didn't start with like the big dog interview right out the gate, worked your way up to him. Is there a big dog interview you're dreaming of making in the next 5 years?
Yes, Lena Dunham.
Nice.
Wait, say that name again. I don't mind being the idiot in the room. I don't know who this is.
Lena Dunham is the creator of Girls. Mm-hmm. And she is, I think, one of the brightest minds in entertainment. And I think that the way that she did her character, Hannah, on Girls is probably the most equal opportunity portrait I've ever seen of a female character, in that she was naked all the time. She was comfortable with her body. She made no apologies for it. She was very open with her sexuality. And there are so many weird hang-ups that society puts towards women.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see a woman be like, you know what? I'm going to take all those rules and I'm going to set them on a table. And I don't want to say that putting down those rules is acting like a guy, but this character lived by the code that if it was a guy, it wouldn't be that crazy. But because it was a girl, it was very crazy. We live in really, really nuts times. So to even make people feel uncomfortable is a gift of your art when it's done tastefully. And I really look at that character and I think that it's great. And one of the bad things about how I am is sometimes people they've labeled me as a misogynist. And that's only because I really do treat everyone the same. And I hold everyone to the same standard. And some people get very confused that when you're not favoring people, that you're not being nice to them. And it's like, no. I'm the same to everyone. And some people, that's a little bit too precious for them to understand.
Sure.
Yeah, so I do want to know about that because we had a conversation when we were together, and if I'm being just completely honest, when we first got together, when we first met in person, I have listened to your show. I was a Circle of Trust member for a while.
Thanks for unsubscribing, Dick.
Yeah, you could have just left off for a while.
No, because here's the reality. I'll tell you the reality afterwards. We'll just leave it ambiguous for now.
You don't have to tell me. It's fine.
But when we when I met you, I expected the full breadth of Mark Brickey that you hear on the air.
Yeah.
Which can be really abrasive. It can be really intense at times. If you don't know what if you don't know what to expect. And I grew up Baptist, right?
Yeah.
So
me too.
So anything
Baptist.
like that just seemed really Southern Baptist, exactly. It just seemed like that was what I would expect. And when I met you, I just remember walking away being really surprised that I really liked you. Like,
wow,
if
thanks.
I'm just being, but you know what I mean? Like, just being flat out honest. I was like, yeah, he's like a really genuine, cool guy. I really, enjoyed my time with him. And you were really honest. And the next morning we had breakfast together and you were super gracious and gave advice and we talked and it was great and it was super cool.
Pay for your meal.
You did pay for my breakfast. So, but here's my question is,
can I get another free breakfast?
When do you, when do I get another breakfast?
Oh, dude, let's go right now.
No, but when everything was said and done, which Mark do you want people to remember you as?
Well, I'm the same guy. When I'm on the radio, I've got less time and I'm trying to entertain you. And when I'm sitting in a booth across from you and it's early in the morning, I'm that same guy at a different energy, right? And so I believe that I'm always that person. But here's what I like about that is that you thought you were going to get one thing and then you hung out with me and you got something else. And that's who I am on the show. Some days I don't feel like doing it and I'm low energy. Other days I'm flying high on Starbucks and Thunder King and donuts and I'm ripping and raging and I've just gone to Disneyland and my magic is strong. So I believe in just being who I am in that moment. And, I know that there's a lot of people like, oh, he's going to be a lot, but I'm at work. I'm doing my job and I'm trying to entertain people. And there'd be a more toned down way to tell the story. But if I feel like singing low hanging fruit, why not? Because that might make somebody laugh. And somebody else right now will be like, if he does that one more time, I'm stopping this. Stop it. I don't care. Stop listening. Like, I'm not here to be your best friend. I'm here to be your friend. And I'm here to be honest. And when I go out to events like that, I like meeting people and knowing that I'm confusing them because, if you've listened to, you were a Circle of Trust member, so maybe you've listened to 50 episodes. That's way different than spending 4 days with me, at different levels. And, I really wish that you guys could have seen the live show that I did there because I put a tremendous amount of work into my Creative South performance. And I really try to cater it to that crowd. And another fun fact, I don't think I ate a meal that weekend where I didn't pay for everybody at my table because I like doing that for people. I'm in a moment in my life where I can afford to do that with people. And it's fun to go out with people and to sort of treat them and give them something a little bit nice because I know when that made a difference to me. And so I don't know. Maybe I need to see a psychologist and work on that because I feel like I'm always auditioning people to be like, see, I really am this nice guy.
So wait. Before you say anything, Patrick, let me circle back to this because that was the reason that I was asking that question. Because I think a lot of times when we walked away, because I think Luke, you had listened to some shows and things like that prior. So when we came away from that, I literally said, and Luke and I both had this conversation of he is the guy, but it's not in a way that's abrasive in person. It's in a way that you realize, oh, Mark is Mark.
Yeah.
And he embraces that. And for us, that was a refreshing thing because what I would have expected was either you're just a big dick in person, right? Or you're the sweetest guy and you wouldn't say a terrible thing about whatever, and you wouldn't,
Well, I said terrible things. I said terrible things.
But the thing is, you fall in this weird middle zone, which is, he really is who he is, and he embraces that. And so I was really appreciative of that. And I was surprised by it, but I think I was surprised by it because very few people are actually genuine these days.
I thought we were going to get an act. I thought we were going to see the Brickey that we listened to, and then meet Mark, the guy behind the mask. And for me, it was like, oh, this is the same dude. I like him.
Listen, Andrew,
it's that.
What both of y'all said is garbage. I think what you were trying to say is that in this, Mark, you said this at the beginning. You made the comment that you're not there to sell yourself. You're there to focus on and sell the person sitting across from you. And I think that's exactly what you did. The entire time we saw you at Creative South, the entire time we interacted with you, and that's what you continue to do on your show. And it's a super cool thing. And the fact that you have all this real experience to back it up, to enhance the conversation and connect with people, it's awesome. So with that being said, I think we're going to actually officially wrap this. So can you please tell everybody where they can find you, support you, send you money, buy you dinners? What needs to happen?
I can tell people where they can't find me. You cannot find me on Wikipedia, and it drives me nuts. So I don't care if you ever go to my website. I don't care if you ever listen to it. I'm not even going to plug it. I'm just going to say that if you write for a newspaper somewhere, just write some article about this, citing me as a real person that does this thing, so I can get on Wikipedia. That's my plug.
That's the missing link?
That's all I need. Once I'm on Wikipedia, the next entry is going to be like, committed suicide after being on Wikipedia.
He had fulfilled all of his dreams.
Done.
So if you're not going to do it, we'll do it. You can find him on AID podcast on Instagram, I believe is what the handle is, right?
Yeah.
And then your adventures in .design.
.design. Hot real estate on the web there,
That's
baby.
Right.
Yeah, dude. You pioneered it, as we said at the beginning of this. You pioneered the.
They paid me money to be a sponsor, and I bought the product.
It's perfect. Yeah, you did it. But check all that stuff out. Again, you're gonna hear top-notch stuff, and now even more so than maybe even in the years past, you're gonna hear a variety of things on the AID network, which is, I think, the diversification is gonna make it even more attainable for people who aren't just in the art world, right? The quote-unquote art world. So check all that stuff out. Before we head out of here, though, will you draw tokens for us so that we know exactly what we're talking about the next time?
All right, so I'm going to pull out this beautiful, shiny token. And, let me put my sunglasses on because it is so bright. And, it happens to be a number that I love. It's the number that I wore on my T-ball jersey, and I never hit the ball once. It's a beautiful number that if you put it on your car, you might hit the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, I've pulled the beautiful number 3, or as in Spanish, tres.
And that one's for Luke. So congratulations, Luke. You got toys and games. You did it. All right, I'm going to need 2 more numbers, though. So
really, just one more. He just needs one more. We can infer the last one.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. If you gave me an option and I'm going into a restroom, would I rather do a number 1 or a number 2? The number 2 is it's one of the 4 greatest feelings as a human being. I love making number 2s. I'm going to go with number 2.
And this one's for Patrick. Patrick, you got art and design. And I have TV and film. You did it, my friend.
And you can play at home, too, with your Masters of One token game. That's right, the Masters of One token game brought to you on the AID network.
Gonna use that audio for sure. We're definitely...
Go for it.
Yeah, he's gonna... Now, Mark has just monetized our own thing against us. That's exactly what he just...
Can I say something before we part ways? And I know that you guys are running long, but I would like to just say something real quick. I fought every urge to hate you guys, and not because I didn't think you were nice guys, and not because I didn't respect what you were doing, but I come from an old school mentality of if people are doing something that you're doing, then you hate them, and they're the enemy, and they're the competition. Yeah. And I'm trying to give my old school advice to millennials, but I'm also trying to learn from millennials. And I'm trying to get into this mindset where we are stronger together versus being divisive and going against other folks. So I was happy to see that you guys were in Creative South. And I thought, you're in a very unique position where these guys are trying to build this thing. They're working really, really hard at it. You've got a lot of information. You should make sure that you hang out with them. You should make sure that you talk, but you should also make sure that you ask questions and that you listen. And getting to hang out with you guys, getting to sort of steal a little bit of your newness and your stokedness on what you're trying to build, and you're still a unit of 3 where I used to be 3 and now it's 1. I tell you, I've got a lot that I could teach you guys, but it was a lot of fun to learn from you guys and to hang out with you guys. And I really walked away saying, see, that's what happens when you put down that wall and just try to make friends instead of always trying to make yourself the biggest dog in the room.
Yeah. No, man, and I think that came through. I appreciate that so much because you could easily big dog us, right? You could be that guy, and I think some people would expect that. And I think what you did is you did something so much greater for the greater good, and I really appreciate those words. So for this episode, we're gonna be out of here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Luke.
And I'm Mark Brickey.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butts.
Good day and good design. Team Masters of One.
So for this Sandbox, we're excited to talk to somebody who we met a few months ago at Creative South, and it's somebody that if you're listening to this show, you've probably heard of. We are talking to none other than the podcast man himself, the Adventures in Design. What is funny about that? Stop laughing.
Okay.
That's an intro. You can do that. That's fine.
What should I have said? I wrote that down.
You wrote down
You guys
podcast
suck.
man?
The podcast man, yeah.
That is the best you could write down.
What?
We've been here for 30 minutes.
No.
I
wrote that earlier.
You had weeks to come up with this.
I literally wrote that earlier today, so you guys suck. All right. What would you say? I'm not gonna say podcast king. That sounds weird.
But he's done other
the
things.
pioneer of design podcasting?
I wasn't done yet.
Let the man finish. I'm trying to be quiet, but let the man finish.
All right.
You guys jumped in while I was trying
it's fine.
to talk.
It's all staying. Go.
No, I can't leave this at this point.
Hey, us Redbeards got to stick together. I think it sounds great. And that's coming from the podcast man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.